Have we started?
No, we are starting at 11. We are waiting. People are slowly coming in, but
okay.
It's not 11 yet. So we are just talking, but we are waiting 5 more minutes. And then I will start, and then I will give the word to Ramona and then to the other 2 MEPs.
Look, can I just say something about public service media?
Go ahead.
I've just seen a tweet which tells me that from Dennis McShane, whom you might know, who tells me that I got a letter into the Financial Times this morning, which I haven't seen, and it's about the situation with public service media and the fact that we have to work together on this. We can't just all keep on telling Vera Jourova to do something. And I think I said in the letter, I'm not quite sure, that the EBU is crucial in this, European Broadcasting Union. Absolutely. And that people should coalesce around the European Union, EBU. First of all, force them to do something because they're not very keen to do anything about their members. But secondly, to work with them and with the Commission on these issues. Because Jourova has so much on her plate, and she has to fight the Commission and she has to fight the member states, and it's just she doesn't have time to do something about public service media.
No, so this is just right.
What?
We have, I think, 3 or 4 people from the EBU who are registered for this meeting.
Good.
And I know in the second phase, Vaclav will also talk about the importance of public service media, and so it's of course also on today's plate. And we promise that we'll start to try to get a bit more with the EBU, which is not so easy.
Because you met, didn't you? No, you didn't meet, it wasn't you. The Media Pluralism Monitor, which is coming out quite soon, identifies about 11 countries where there are problems with public service, 11 member states where there are problems with public service media. I'm very keen on this because we get every evening at 7:30, we get shit, poured on us every evening from the propaganda outlet, and so it's very distressing, and that's why I'm so manic about it. I'm not a maniac, but this is where I keep on talking about this. I apologize.
We're starting soon, and I really want to keep the agenda and the participants list, and I'm sure there will be time.
All right, great. All right, thank you.
To discuss that also in the chat afterwards, but I would just like to keep now 2 more minutes, and then I know as Ramona has people are still entering. Is Vaclav already there, Yuklan? I don't see.
No, I don't see him coming yet.
Yeah, there he is. I would like to have Yana from the other MEP. I hope she is coming now.
Yana is here, I think.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
hello.
Excellent.
Yes,
okay, then we wait 1 more minute and we start. Okay. Okay, I think we should start. Yuklan, you also admit people, no? Because. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to all of you to this, it's been timely for years, seminar on political interference in the media. We are very happy to have such a distinguished group of experts, panelists, and participants from both politicians, media leaders, experts, academia, but also our union leaders who are fighting very hard at national level. They are fighting very hard for journalism as a public good and for the safety and protection of journalists. In this morning session, I am very happy that to have start from 3 distinguished MEPs, all ladies. I don't know if it's only ladies who support media freedom, probably not, but I don't think it's by chance. From Romania, from Hungary, and from Estonia. Hungary and Estonia are both countries that are part of our project, which, by the way, is supported by Open Society Foundation. We have an interesting mix of members from north, south, east, but also outside the European Union, including Belarus and Turkey, where we have some more in-depth studies, and we will be very curious in the second session to hear more of this study from Marc Gruber, who did some research, also some research regarding resilience of our members, what they are doing, what they should be doing, what they can be doing. As I said, political interference has always existed, but I think it's fair to say that's a growing phenomenon within the European Union, but also throughout the Council of Europe countries. And this is not only due to COVID and the government's fear of critical assessment, but also to a growing trend, as Vaclav will probably explore later, a sort of illiberal turn we are experiencing in Europe, giving populist voices more space than actually facts we need so necessarily at the moment. Journalism is a public good, and this must be protected and nurtured and kept clean like water. We are here for the right of water, but we are here for the right to inform. And with that, I would like to give now the floor to Ramona. Thank you, Ramona, for a little introduction. Ramona actually is an MEP from Romania. She's been very active on media freedom. She actually is the founder and co-chair of the Media Freedom Group in the European Party. She is a member of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, which was one of the major committees dealing with media freedom. And Ramona has a legal background. Ramona, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Very happy to be here in such a distinguished company. And I'm glad to share this honor with my colleagues Anna and Yana, who will also take the floor. They're dedicated to the topic as well. And I must say that the European Parliament in general is still dedicated to such important topics as media freedom. I'm very much also looking forward to seeing some of the insights of this comparative study of news consumption and political polarization in Central and Eastern Europe. We all know that the region has been in constant decline in terms of media freedom over the past years, experiencing important political interference. And we have the prominent examples, Hungary, Poland, Slovenia, but also Bulgaria and Romania. They are all faced with such high levels of political interference, and Hungary is the classical example. It is true, with not only state-owned media controlled by Viktor Orban, but also privately owned media that is basically now in the hands of business people close to Fidesz party. But after Hungary, what we see now is Poland catching up very, very quickly, with high-ranking government officials announcing a repolonization of the press. And we see how the PiS government, through the use of state-controlled companies, which most often have nothing to do with the media sector, is however trying to acquire and control the media landscape, forcing independent media out in order to have a monopoly over information and a monopoly over truth. Pika and Orlen, the very known example of the state-controlled Polish oil company, is now trying to acquire Polska Press. Fortunately, this action has been suspended by a Polish court for the moment, but it is clear an indication that the political sphere wants to exercise even more control over the media. We also have notorious examples from Bulgaria, where certain politicians own large media trusts and cigarette manufacturers have gained control of a great number of media outlets, using them in a partisan way. We have the examples of Romania, and this goes back a long time ago in time. There's a very interesting study published at a certain point in time disclosing media moguls in the media in Romania. What is happening is that media concentration basically puts enormous pressure on the small local independent journalists, on everything that we call freelancers and media professionals who do independent investigative work and who assume the important role of watchdog that a free press should play in a functioning democracy. Ad prices drop, obviously, as government-friendly stations receive subsidies, leading to the economic unsustainability of the outlets, which depend on this revenue. And so literally uncomfortable journalists are forced out. Last year, the Reuters Institute published a report on the assault faced by journalists in Central and Eastern Europe, noting that the future of journalists remains uncertain as a result of politicians' hostility and ownership concentration under politically well-connected moguls. And the conclusion was that media have been turned into a government cartel. Now with the pandemic, we have seen even more the important, the crucial role, I would say, that the free media can play. People need reliable information. They look for this reliable fact-based data. And I think without media independence, obviously, we can never get this type of reliable information. It is an uneven battle anyway. Free media providing reliable information versus the huge and massive propaganda machine and disinformation machine that we are all seeing these days. And it is amazing the way it operates. Through the Media Ownership Monitor, which is a pilot project initiated by the Commission that will start in 2021 and that gives grants to media associations mapping media ownership within the EU. And there's a call for applications which ended in February 2021. The European Commission, and not only the European Commission, will get a better overview of this situation of media concentration in Europe and basically what could be done about it. But I think what is crucial now, very, very important, is to have specific programs helping out the small local independent media outlets. This is something that I have underlined a number of times in all of my discussions with the Commission. We need to support these media professionals who basically dedicate their career to investigative journalists and who are searching for this reliable fact-based information. This is why, for example, I tabled a pilot project in this sense for the upcoming 2022 budget. This pilot project is proposing such grants for small and medium-sized independent outlets. Yes, it is time that the European Commission, it has been time for a while that the European Commission does engage more. I'm happy to see that they do it. The Vice President Jourova is indeed very dedicated to this matter. We have the European Democracy Action Plan and the Media Action Plan on the table, and they are foundations for actions that need to be taken in the future years. And I very much would like to see these kind of actions doubled by very concrete steps, such as the anti-SLAPP, the long-awaited anti-SLAPP legislation. And I'm truly hoping that Commissioner Jourova and Commissioner Reinders will come up with a proposal in the form of a directive, a legislative piece of work, not recommendations. Croatia alone, I think, is an example of how SLAPPs can affect the work of a journalist. We have there over 1,100 ongoing SLAPPs. With the public broadcaster itself filing 36 lawsuits against its own employees. This is quite amazing. Recently, I learned that Romania also has a very recent SLAPP with one that was signaled by the Council of Europe as well. We are all talking about free media, but we, I think, are not discussing it as the fourth fundamental pillar of democracy and rule of law. Basically, free media is this fourth pillar, and the way we treat the other with our attention, with the reporting on the rule of law mechanism, with all of the action, including legislative action, I think we should do it similarly with the free press. And last but not least, I would like to underline that we are hurting media freedom by financing it directly with money coming from member states to these public and private televisions. And I'm seeing it right now. Significant amounts of money and subsidies were granted to all kinds of media outlets in Romania from the government directly to support them, to support information campaigns. Very impressive amounts of money, which are unfortunately now supporting one political side or the other in a battle that should not be financed via what we call independent press, because of course we cannot discuss about free media any longer. So I would be extremely firm in stating that government must not fund free media directly. Yes, measures need to be taken in the pandemic context as well for media outlets. Their employees should be protected like all of the employees from other companies, and there are solutions to economically support the companies like we do with all of the other companies, but this kind of direct financing is basically blowing up everything that we are trying to build, and it is not easy to build in time, and try to have basically from this mass of mobile ownership, those voices, free voices, some of them left this media trust, which are building slowly small projects. And this kind of projects, like I said, they do need support in order to guarantee democracy, because this is free media, the backbone of any democracy. And here I think there's no miracle wand, no miracle solution. We simply have to remain extremely united in action. We have to support from the side of the European Parliament legislation. We have to continue to put pressure so that the Commission does deliver on the plan that has been already put on the table. And then the associations of journalists should also stay extremely united, I would say, because the signals that I have been receiving since I am in the European Parliament are quite encouraging, and I've never seen them so active. So please continue to do that and reach to us with this kind of situations, because people need to know also that your voice is represented, and it does exist in the form of supporting this rights and this actions. Thank you very much. This would be my remarks. I'm truly sorry that I need to leave you in about, I think, 20 minutes or so. Actually 10 minutes now that I'm looking at the clock, but I remain open to any dialogue. If there are questions for me, please forward them to the email, and I will be to the email of the Parliament. I'll be very happy to respond to these questions. And thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you so much for this very extensive panorama you gave to us. It shows you know it all, you know all the different challenges, but you also responded to the question of this morning's session: why does media independence matter? I won't repeat it, but I appreciate it very much. And I will be happy also to talk to you afterwards from the outcome we will have, also from the outcome of our report, which will not only be for our unions, because you are absolutely right, we need to be united. We need to show solidarity first among the profession. It's working rather well, but it's a challenge. You know how journalists are. I also appreciate that you mentioned the issue of freelance journalists, because that's a particular issue for our federation at the very moment, because they are also economically very hard hit, and we have news desert all over Europe. So thank you very much. Also about funding, I think this is interesting what you say, no government funding. We are for public funding, but of course at arm's length with special criteria, and we are happy to give some best practice in that as well. So thank you very much. I just wanted to remember everybody, we have a hashtag independent media, and we are happy for all of you to tweet. And now I would like to invite Yana Toom. Yeah, there you are. Hi, Yana. Good to see you. I remember last time we had a coffee outside. You are a former journalist. You know very much the challenges facing. You're from Estonia, which is a small Baltic country, which has worked very hard, actually, with some best practice from the Nordic countries to be independent and not give in to the illiberal turn, but you are also facing some problems. You have been in the European Parliament since 2014, and the floor is yours on these two issues we are discussing, and maybe with some input from your own country. Thank you, Yana.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me? Is it okay? Okay, great. Yes. First of all, I'm sorry I'm sitting here in the blanket. It's very cold in my office. It's not a sign of disrespect, just absolutely inhuman. But okay, yes, frankly speaking, it's always not easy to take floor after Ramona, for she says pretty much everything. But still, I have to add some things. Of course, independent media is absolutely crucial in democratic society. There is no question at all. So somebody sent me a message. I think it was somebody from my colleagues. But you have to speak for 5 minutes. Why independent media is so important? I would not waste time for 5 minutes I believe we're on the same side, all of us, so there is no need to explain like obvious things. But I cannot agree that, free media and reliable media is the same. The problem which I see here in last weeks and last months during pandemic, all kind of people, who are, I don't know, who easy pandemic example. They don't believe in corona, they don't believe in vaccines, they do all kinds of stupid things. They drink, I don't know, urine to treat corona and so on and so forth. And if you try to come to them and say, please stop, they say, there is freedom of speech. We are free, we are protected, and so on and so forth. This is, of course, challenge. I mean, how to find the balance between this huge amount of fake news, which are produced in enormous amounts. And all these people, of course, try to hide themselves behind this freedom of speech. Another thing is, Ramona mentioned wonderful pilot projects to support small communities and so on and so forth. Absolutely great idea. And I don't want to sound demotivating. But several years I was fighting with European Commission, and finally we succeeded, and we got money. I believe it was like $500,000 or so to support minority newspapers working in minority language in the European Union. And what do you think? How many minority newspapers applied for this money? Zero. I mean, zero. There was a call from the Commission and nothing happened. And when we started to investigate what's the reason, this is about poor working conditions. I mean, poor working conditions means that, if there is a small newspaper with, let's say, 3 journalists, they just cannot afford themselves to send one of them. The idea was to send these journalists to some bigger European news outlets just to learn a little bit, to widen their scope, to exchange best practices, and so on and so forth. They just could not afford it. And if we look from the side of, I'm a member also of Committee of Employment and Social Affairs, I was there for 7 years. Now I switched, but I was there. And I know exactly that in very many member states, our journalists don't have collective agreements, which make them extremely vulnerable if in relations with their employees. You know it better than me. And of course, if you are vulnerable and if you are not protected at your workplace, you cannot be independent. And here we come to not just direct political interference, like in Poland and Hungary, but also to hidden one. They don't try that this is advertising. We don't know who paid for that, but we see these things constantly. And if journalists are underpaid, if they don't feel secure in their workplace, it leads to all kinds of deviations. Another thing of hidden interference it cannot be not political, it can be whatever. Last example from Estonia is, for instance, Huawei, who are working very hard to promote themselves, and they do it very well, and nobody knows, it's absolutely untransparent, who pays for that, how much do they pay, and so on and so forth. So this is a huge amount of problem which we have to solve. Another thing, as you mentioned, I'm from Estonia, we discussed it, the situation very well. I'm Russian. I'm Russian speaker. Russian minority in Estonia is like 30%. We don't have a single daily newspaper in Russian language, which means that our people, especially elderly people, are reading newspapers and news outlets from Russia. When I read this report, which comes from Estonia, it's like, okay, our women, our minorities has access, there is no problem. There is a problem. But if you of course, we all try to read in our native language. It's absolutely logical, And situation is that our people are really living in absolutely different informational spaces. And this is not the issue only in Estonia, I believe. We have big communities of, I don't know, Turks in Germany or Turks in Bulgaria, or you know it very well, This is a problem. And of course, we have also to support this minority media. This is a matter of not only social inclusion. Sometimes it comes very, very close to a matter of just, of security. This is a security risk, I believe, that if some people and in big groups of society are following the media of not friendly countries, it is not okay. And this is also the challenge that we face here. Of course, we all know that in some countries, whistleblowers are not protected at all. This is another thing. All the sources of journalism and so on and so forth. And what Ramona also mentioned, of course, this anti-SLAPP legislation, which have to be put in place. There are things which we can do, so to say, from Brussels, from European Commission, from European Parliament, and so on and so forth. But I'm a former journalist myself. I worked like a journalist for, I believe, 20 years or so. And I was editor-in-chief of several big Russian newspapers. They all dead now. Not a single one remained. And I really believe in self-regulation. Self-regulation is absolutely a great thing. And I know that in many member states, it works absolutely perfectly. But if you have self-regulation as a rule, it doesn't work like 100% without public regulation. But if it comes to public regulation, it has to be independent authority. But in some member states, this is a problem. And even if they have code of conduct plus public regulation, if this public regulation is kind of, abusing their power, this is a problem, of course. So, but here I will stop. I don't like to take a floor without proper discussion. So for me, it's always much more interesting. Journalists is still alive in me. Just to answer the question, to listen to you, and then maybe we can go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana. Thank you very much. I think it's also very important to talk from this perspective, not only from a small country, but from a minority, in this case, the Russian minority in Estonia. The EFJ, actually together with the ECPMF, had a mission 2 years ago, also discussing the influence of Russia in Estonian media. And we realized, yes, there is not enough done for minority media in Estonia. So indeed, this is an important issue. In the chat, I only read that the importance of support for small media is very important, and there is some good practice as well. But before we have a short discussion, maybe I will give the floor, and I'm very happy that she is here with us, to Anna Dorat, who is an MEP from Hungary. And she's also in the Civil Liberties Committee. She's been very active in civil society in Hungary, a sort of symbol for the fight for fundamental rights, as you can imagine, a real challenge in that country. So dear Anna, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm really sorry to being delayed. It was not how I planned, but I'm really happy to be invited to this really important discussion. And especially, I want to say that I really appreciate that the European Federation of Journalists organizing this series of webinars in this really important topic. Of course, I believe that in this circle, I don't have to highlight how important is independent and pluralistic media, as I believe it's a fourth pillar of democracy. And therefore, it is a key in upholding the rule of law, democracy and transparency and democratic values of the European Union, because media empowers individual citizens and promotes democratic ideals through spread of credible information. And here I would stop because I can't not talk a little bit about Hungary. I mean, I know that all of you are really aware what's happening, but one of the reasons why I'm dealing with the media freedom so much, because I believe that if we want to fight for a European Hungary, a Hungary where European values are not just shared, but protected, therefore rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights goes hands in hand, we must talk about media, because without a pluralistic media, you can't talk about democracy. And right now, in the past 10 years, our government deliberately demolished media pluralism. Media freedom is only existing in paper, and much of the media is concentrated right now in one hand. For sure, all of you are aware that the public media works as a mouthpiece of the government, which is wise is also a really worrisome phenomenon. It's because the national TV and national broadcaster channels are financed from taxpayers' money, which is more than 300 million euros a year. Therefore, the propaganda is paid by our money, and most of the citizens are not even aware of that. Meanwhile, in the past 12 years, governmental closely oligarchs are bought up all the local and regional newspapers, media outlets, and at the end, they created a foundation which everybody willingly just give them for free. Therefore, it's all concentrated in one hand, and all together with the national media broadcaster and these outlets together covers 78% of the Hungarian media, which I don't have to tell how worrisome in that sense. And on the other hand, they still keep shutting up any critical voices. It's not enough for them that the main resources coming from them, the main information channels already owned by them. The latest news has already, as everybody knows, and it was even a debate on that in the European Parliament, was the case of Strugariu, the last independent critical radio channel. There are no politically involved critical radio channel exist anymore in Hungary. There are still independent media outlets. And of course, the government is always pinpointing that the outreach is higher than any of the governmental media outlets. However, if you add up, it doesn't cover the whole country. Lately, the only free public sphere information or media sphere, if I can say it, is social media and Facebook in it. And this is why it's also really important for us to work on the Digital Services Act, because it highly influences what's happening in Hungary, because the political content, online political content, it has to be monitored and has to be controlled. However, in such countries as Hungary, social media became the last platform where we can show different arguments, and we can also show the different side of the coins. The result of the past 12 years in Hungary resulted that people living in parallel realities, they're reading different news, they're reading different understanding of what's happening, not just nationwide, but European and global politics and situation as well, which is created that everybody believes that the other only reads fake news. The society is so polarized that we can't argue anymore about any details, not just about politics, but anything related to our life, because we are watching like two separate movies. And I think there's this is the phenomenon which shows the most why an independent and free and pluralistic media is needed. A media which is not pro-governmental or pro-oppositional, a critical media. This is one of the arguments of our government, that there are rightish and leftish media. I believe that being independent, it doesn't mean that you don't have an ideological way of thinking. Being independent means that you critical. It doesn't matter that towards the government or the opposition or whom, but you are working on facts, you're showing all the picture, and then you are arguing. And this is getting, the sphere of doing that is getting smaller and smaller every day. This is why the independent quality journalism should be promoted, and future efforts to combat disinformation and hate speech should ensure that freedom of expression and information are properly safeguarded across the European Union, and that citizens are empowered when it comes to media literacy. And I would want to stay here as well. Such illiberal regimes can turn upside down the media and create these polar worlds, because also media literacy is really low in Hungary. And I don't think it's a Hungarian phenomenon. I think it is a general European phenomenon, but we have to also tackle this issue, because in case of a higher media literacy, also citizens would fight for free and independent media, because it would be their own interest to get the news, especially in a world where it's really difficult to distinguish between fake news and real news. Nowadays, especially, and now I'm bringing back social media. On social media, everything is equal. My opinion or a journalist published piece has the same value by the followers. In the sense, just because I'm telling my opinion, I can put it as a news? No. We also have to set up new standards. What news means, what kind of criteria they have to set up. I believe it's also another issue, a European issue, that media or journalist ethic, generally accepted ethic, doesn't exist anymore. We have to fight for that as well. We have to have global agreements on how journalists and how a media outlet should behave. There's a lot of hatred spread in Hungary, covered as a news piece, and basically it's pure honest opinion of the journalist. And nowadays in Hungary, this doesn't have to mention whether it's an opinion piece anymore. Basically, if they say any lie about me as an oppositional politician in some news sites, I'm the one who has to go to the court and defend myself. And maybe in 2-3 years, the court gonna say that, yes, they lied, but it's already done. And especially in a country where the media coverage covered like 78% in one hand, you cannot fight for this battle. You can't win. Your truth or the truth never goes through. And I believe that there's a lot that the European Union can do that, because never forget, when we're talking about such countries as Hungary or Poland, or lately, unfortunately, Slovenia, in regard of media pluralism, they are all member states. We are all a part of the same group. Therefore, we are all responsible for each other. I believe it's not a Hungarian problem, or a Slovenian, or a Polish, or a Bulgarian, or and so on and so forth, because it's just as other rule of law issues, it started a domino effect. Actually, right now, what's happening in Slovenia is copying the model of the Orban system, literally, with the money of Orban, which actually based on European funds. This is a really serious issue we have to tackle, and I think media pluralism and protection of media pluralism has to be highlighted on a European level even further. I'm really happy to see that in the yearly rule of law report, it is mentioned, but it's not enough. It is not enough. We have to connect the rule of law report to the rule of law mechanism. We have to fight for that. The mechanism itself is not mostly covering corruption cases, but as it's called, rule of law mechanism, let's go back to the root of the issues. Therefore, I believe that there's a lot we can do in a European level about that. Yes, I don't want to go further, because of course I can talk hours and hours about what kind of things. Maybe one more thing I wanted to mention. Many times also from a governmental side, but also some other European countries, I received that comments that what's happening in Hungary, it's really worrisome. However, at least journalists are not dying. They are not murdered and they are not sending to prison. So it's basically this self-censorship, which we can observe on a daily basis. It's a phenomenon that can be stopped easily, and it's also have to come from our side. But I want you to state here that just because there is no physical harm yet towards journalists, it doesn't mean that they are not harmed. It doesn't mean that they don't need protection. And I don't want to see any one more journalist dying in Europe, because we had way too many lately, in order to prove that, oh, there's an issue there as well. And we also have to take really seriously how self-censorship growing and growing within journalists. There's a lot, I talked to a lot of journalists also before I became a politician. They told me many stories, and when I asked why you haven't published, and they said that because I can't prove it 100%, just 98, and I cannot afford to go to court, I cannot afford to lose my job, and my publisher wouldn't allow me because they wouldn't be able to pay for the legal fees as well. We also need to help the journalists in order to protect them from the unbelievable court cases and the expenses coming with that. And we have to fight for also to give back the acceptance, a highly social acceptance of the profession of journalism. It's not something that anybody can do. It is a profession. There's a lot of knowledge and expertise behind it. But lately, journalist is also mentioned as somebody who just put the words on the paper. We have to also fight on that, fight for media literacy, and fight for the protection of journalists and free media.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Yeah, there was also a lot in there. Media literacy, you mentioned, absolutely right. Self-censorship, we have quite a few studies, a recent one by the Council of Europe on self-censorship, and it indeed shows that it's everywhere. It's in every single member state, in some more than in others, and media capture doesn't help. But you're also right, Hungary is a member of the European Union, and that's why, and also with the help of European Commission and its different instruments, we are fighting it where we can. You all know that the EFJ is member of the MFRR, the Media Freedom Rapid Response Mechanism, and Hungary gives us a lot of work, and that is good. But yeah, we have to continue the fight. Unfortunately, we don't have much time now to go into discussion. I know Schroeder from Croatia would like to say a few words on the lawsuits. This is a specific case in Croatia, and also shows how serious that is. I would rather have this in the second session, which is actually led by Maja, because there we are dealing with specific issues from our member states, from our unions. So if you're all right, Schroeder, we will do that in the next session. I think our colleagues, our MEPs know also the very serious situation, specifically in Croatia, against lawsuits. This is a way of self-censorship. It's really another sort of smear campaign against journalists, and our both Croatian colleagues, Maja Sever, the president of the Union of the Croatian Union of Journalists, and Schroeder from the president of the Association of Journalists, are both sort of victims of that. Christoph wants to speak briefly. It's difficult for me to say no to Schroeder and to say yes to Christoph. Christoph, you're with us for the next session. Or is it specifically to one of the three or two leaving MEPs? Then I give you shortly, but really, really shortly, the word, because we have to continue. Christoph, 1 minute.
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. I just want to say thank you very much for these very, very good contributions, and I think we have a strong allies in the European Parliament. But as I said before this started, to some of you, this is such a serious question, and something must be done immediately. The description is okay. We've worked out how everything works with political interference, but we must actually do something concrete. And I think we can't continue to go to Vera Jourova and say, Vera Jourova, help us, do something. We can't actually keep going to the European Parliament, do something. We have to start organizing at the level of NGOs. We also have to reach out to the European Broadcasting Union, who have all these organizations, the public service media organizations as members. We have to work with the EBU. We have to work with the media freedom representatives, with Dunja Mijatovic, with Teresa Ribeiro. We have to create a movement to defend media freedom, especially in the public service media, because that is the easiest source for the politicians to start interfering. And I think there are about 11 countries at the moment which are at high risk, or the public service media at high risk. And really, we must stop asking the European Union to do something. We must start working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely right. And I think the member state level, we all say at the end of each single seminar, what is lacking is the political will, and that in the end is at member state level. And I think what you said is a very good introduction to our next session, because public service media, which indeed is crucial also against the polarization of our societies, which is ever more a problem, and will be discussed right now. So I would like to thank all of you, specifically now still there, Anna and Yana, for your very insightful contributions, very important indeed. And I let you know, I will knock on your door, I hope soon, and we will continue our very good cooperation also with Ramona, who already left. So thank you very much. For those of you who can stay, you're more than welcome, but I understand that you have to continue. So having said that, I'm happy to give over the floor to Maja, who will now moderate the next session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Renate. Hello and welcome to our second discussion on this seminar, Building Independent Media to Combat Political Interference. The webinar about the status of media independence in Europe and illiberal turn. My name is Maja Sever. I will be the moderator, and our guest will present two interesting researches. Concentrating examples, but also real world ideas on how to improve the situation. We believe that you find an interesting and instructive, and I invite you to get involved with your comments as questions. As Hrvoje Zovko, my colleague, we will give you a floor for after our guests. After the introductory speech, the mob can include you on the discussion, or you can ask the questions in the chat. In the beginning, I will ask our guests to introduce themselves. Vaclav Stetka is a lecturer in communication in science and media studies. But please, Vaclav, can you tell us just a few words about yourself?
All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you to the European Federation of Journalists for inviting me to this exciting and so well-attended webinar. Just a few words, really. I am a senior lecturer in media and communication studies at Loughborough University in the UK. And I previously held the positions at the University of Oxford, also Charles University in Prague. And I specialize in political communication, and at the moment I'm a principal investigator of a rather substantial research project called the Illiberal Turn, and that the project is about the relationship between news consumption, political polarization, and democracy in Central and Eastern Europe. And I'm going to be presenting some selected findings from this project, which is still ongoing. We are reaching towards the final stage. And obviously that's the more important for us to get a feedback on the findings. Okay.
Thank you. About your research for a few minutes, but first, Marc Gruber currently works as an independent media expert for various organizations, including the Council of Europe. Marc, can you please say a few more words about yourself?
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Marc Gruber. Actually, I used to work myself for the European Federation of Journalists a couple of years ago. I was a colleague of Renate and Uklan. I worked for the EFJ for 13 years. And after that, I started as a freelance journalist and then a media consultant. As you just said, I'm an expert on a couple of activities for the Council of Europe and other organizations. And I'm very pleased to have been selected to prepare a background paper for this very seminar, the webinar. That I will present it, I guess, later or just now. It's not available to all the participants because it's still to be finalized according to what each of you, some of you will say during the actual seminar right now.
Yes, maybe Marc, now the floor. You will present your research among the branches of the European Federation of Journalists, giving examples of campaigns and best practices and proposing recommendations. So maybe we can hear your research and your speech first.
Yep, thank you, Maja. So basically, I will just switch and share my my screen, if you don't mind, to a classical, sorry for that, a classical PowerPoint presentation, but it's still better than just seeing my own face while I'm talking. Oh, I cannot share my screen. It says the organizer deactivated the option.
Maybe we can call Uklan to help us.
Yeah, now it's activated.
Okay, let's try. Yes. Yes, there we go. Okay, can you see it? Yes. Okay, there we go. The survey, first of all, the scope of the survey itself, as I say, it's a mix of countries which were selected by, I guess, the EFJ and the donor organization of the webinar, the Open Society Foundations. So it's an interesting, if not challenging, mix of countries with a couple of Western European democracies, sometimes old democracies, such as the UK, but also Italy, Spain, Austria. Then we have a couple of Central European countries like Hungary. Poland was added later on because we had interesting contributions, and it's interesting also to have a kind of parallel between Hungary and Poland. Former Soviet Union country, member of the EU now, Estonia. Former Yugoslav country, candidate country, North Macedonia. Then two CIS countries, former Soviet Belarus and Ukraine, and a big chunk being Turkey outside of the EU. As I said, it's quite challenging, and that's why on day 2 tomorrow you will have this headline saying challenging regimes, Belarus, Turkey, and Ukraine, and obviously having good practice and positive examples in some case was not easy. So how did I do that? The methodology was actually started by the EFJ itself with a questionnaire circulated to the EFJ affiliates, so associations and unions in the countries. Some of them I saw are among the people connected today to the webinar. I think about people from Turkey, North Macedonia, Austria, and Poland, and maybe some others, I don't know. Some of the countries like the UK did not reply formally, but there is a lot of information obviously on the website in English, which is hopefully more practical for all of us of the NUJ. I also had someone interviews on the phone, for example, in Austria and Italy. And then, of course, EFJ general activities and desk research. This background paper it's quite short. It's 12 pages. Obviously, I want it to be accurate, but it cannot be exhaustive, especially given the problems in some countries, which are very, very important. And apart from the EFJ, many organizations, such as, for example, the platform of the Security of Journalists of the Council of Europe, but also the OSCE, the European Campaign for Press and Media Freedom, the European Institute in Florence. A lot of organizations have been monitoring political pressures on journalists over the past years. So basically, I will just present it. It's open for comments, obviously to be complimented and also to be a critic. You can be a critic. I mean, your freedom of speech is obviously respected in this aspect as well. The paper itself follows, first of all, an analysis of the threats, political pressure, targeted pressures. We've already talked about slaps and the general legal environment. And then, as you said, Maja, a positive approach with good practice, a couple of good examples, and of course, recommendations. Here are the main member organizations of the EFJ in the countries covered, which either replied formally to the survey or I contacted or used the content on their website. So let's go to the results, because this is actually why we are here today. Quite, I would say, surprisingly, but now it's not a surprise at all, is that the priority for the respondents in terms of threats were the political pressures. More than the targeted individual pressures and more than the legal environment. As you can see, among the responses I got, political pressures on media, in particular public service media, were the most important aspect to take into account. Targeted pressures were put forward, in particular in Italy, because in Italy there is this specific situation about journalists living and working with constant police protection because of organized crime, even though that's not a political interference, but also because some populist representatives of populist parties have been targeted journalists very precisely and very individually. Obviously, if you go to countries like Belarus and Turkey, political pressure and the legal environment are linked. Because let's be honest, Belarus is clearly a dictatorship, and Turkey, well, it's the biggest jail of journalists in Europe. So obviously, these two issues are linked to some extent. If I mention a couple of precise examples, the reply from Spain was, for example, that public service media are still governed by more political criteria than professionals. In Estonia, the union put forward that politicians often accuse public television of being untrustworthy. In Italy, the section of the Union of Journalists at RAI, USIG-RAI, said that the autonomy of RAI is still put at risk. And I will talk about this a little bit later, about the way out, the way forward. In Hungary, unfortunately, according to the words of the Union of Journalists, political control over media has become legendary. And as Anna Donat just said, a lot of media, including private media, print media, are now controlled by businessmen close to the power, to Viktor Orban. And this is estimated to 80% of the media across the country. Same for Turkey, where 90% of, according to the recent figures, 90% of the Turkish media outlets are either controlled or are sympathetic to the government, either through nominations, for example, at the public TV TRT or the press agency Anadolu, or because actually they are ruled or owned by pro-government businessmen. And Poland, I guess Christoph may say something later about that as well. Public service media are largely backing the government and therefore losing trust and credibility. And that's actually a big issue, the trust and credibility. Even though, for example, the situation is not the same in Hungary or in other countries. I think the big problem with Hungary as a member of the EU is that it's not just political control in order to, let's say, defend the power, but also to spread literally, as Anna Donna just said before, propaganda in terms of political, but also cultural and religious and social aspects of all the content of the media, to the extent that, for example, according to some testimonies and reports, in many media, journalists were obliged to wait for, so to say, okay from the management and the higher up leadership when they wanted to report on migration, EU politics, church issues, human rights, LGBTI, minorities, and so on. So here, it's not just about defending the people in power, it's literally also carrying a very heavy cultural and political propaganda message through the media. For the second aspect on political interference is to target individual journalists and put pressure on them. Again, unfortunately, Hungary was mentioned here, with individual journalists sometimes being identified with names being mentioned on the website because they defend the so-called foreign interest. In Austria, the FPÖ, the populist party, targeted also journalists from the public TV ORF, especially during election campaigns. And in Poland, journalists were victims of slaps with, for example, one journalist having to face 50 different legal condemnations against him. Some states also create and maintain a hostile environment. Obviously, this is the case of Turkey and Belarus. Unfortunately, Belarus is, I would say, playing in a different league because it's clearly a dictatorship. Actually, it's also the only country here which is not member of not even the Council of Europe. So it's really here the situation is extremely critical. But also in Turkey. Since 2016, after the failed coup against Erdogan, Turkey has been one of the worst countries in Europe in terms of making things extremely difficult from the legal point of view of journalists. And recently we had the example then of Poland a couple of weeks ago, literally, where the government wants to introduce a law on tax advertising in media. And actually the Council of Europe, through its Commissioner of Human Rights, Dunja Mijatovic, was expressing its concern that it may lead to, I quote, the suffocation of independent media outlets in the country. And then Ukraine is also interesting because either virtually or even more practically these days, the country is still at war since 2014. And even though the situation is extremely difficult for the authorities, there have been a lot of examples of abuse of legislation on national security and disinformation. And a lot of, for example, either journalists from foreign countries have lost their accreditation, or whole media outlets were accused of being paid by the aggressor. We all know who the aggressor here is. It's obviously Russia. So actually, there are plenty of examples also from other countries. I just mentioned the most important ones here. Maybe, for example, just another very striking example from Turkey is that last year, according to the reports by the Association of Journalists, 894 journalists saw their press cards cancelled officially because they were under review. And 1 year after, many of them, 600 of them, still did not get their press cards back. And again, according to another report, 1 journalist out of 6 in Turkey either has or is in an ongoing trial. 1 out of 6, that gives you the measure of the political pressure and the harassment against journalists in Turkey. So this is a very, I would say, gloomy maybe perspective of press freedom and political pressure in these countries. But there are also a couple of obviously positive examples, positive developments. And maybe what we find more interesting, more important is the way out. Well, first of all, self-regulation, efficient self-regulation exists in some countries, starting with the UK. Obviously, the United Kingdom is maybe the first and oldest, has the oldest system of self-regulation in Europe, with formally the Press Complaint Commission, which has been transformed more recently into the Independent Press Standards Organization, but also major media outlets such as the BBC, The Guardian, and other big media have very strong code of conduct and code of practice, which are enforced very efficiently, including with impartiality. And as we mentioned before, the distinction between information and comment and opinion and so on. So that obviously the UK, as a lot of time, as very often, is an example to follow. But interestingly enough, also, for example, in Spain at regional level, self-regulation is quite efficient. For example, in Catalonia and Andalusia, with entities such as the Professional Journalist Corporation in Andalusia and the Council for Audiovisual Media, but also the Council of the Media of Catalonia, where the decisions taken by these bodies are binding when journalists feel that they are put under pressure. And even though the media accept this system voluntarily, once they accept it, the decision of the bodies are binding. And this is something very interesting to keep in mind, which has been raised also in North Macedonia with the setting up of the Council of Media Ethics of Macedonia, where the members are brought together based on the principle of free will. And this council can apply moral sanctions. No, it's not really binding, but even though there are sanctions to observe the professional standards. It's a bit more challenging in other countries. An interesting example is Estonia, where two different bodies are coexisting, two different self-regulatory bodies are coexisting, one funded in 91, the other one funded quite later. And it is a concern expressed by the Union of Journalists that it is a pity that two self-regulatory bodies are coexisting in a country, and it would be much more efficient for journalists and for the public that one single efficient self-regulatory bodies would exist. Unfortunately, in other countries like Hungary, Poland, and Turkey, these self-regulatory mechanisms are not efficient either. They have never been, or they are not anymore. In Hungary, there used to be an editors-in-chief's forum, which does not exist anymore. Major media such as Népszabadság used to have editorial boards, but this does not exist either anymore. So according to the Union of Journalists in Hungary, the media authorities do not even acknowledge these structures as real partners, as existing. In Poland, the journalists were worried by the extremely high polarized media environment, which is reflected also in the attempts to self-regulate the profession. You have at one side, you have the one organization, the Association of Polish Journalists, who is monitoring media content on its own, and then another body who is monitoring on the other hand. But in fact, Poland has no history of independent and strong media self-regulation. Self-regulation is actually an issue on its own. We could talk for hours about that, but it was just an example, a couple of examples I wanted to present here. Apart from self-regulation, we also have good examples from campaigns and actions by unions. Obviously, the most obvious you think about campaigns was the one from the NUJ about to defend the BBC. Because the interesting thing here is that public broadcaster, even in countries like the UK, Italy, Spain, Austria, the one major concern of all the respondents of the Union's Association of Journalists is that public broadcasting is never guaranteed. There are always attacks. That's why, for example, the NUJ in the UK has been always defending the BBC, but also with a more civil society campaigning approach. You can see here the logo of the Campaigns for Press and Broadcasting Freedom, the CPBF, which has been stopped at national level in 2018, but still exists at regional level, for example, north of England here. Another interesting example is Teletodos in Spain, which is a coalition of association of journalists, unions, civil society organizations, consumers, and so on. And they organize not only public debates, but also since a couple of years, they have webcasts, they have joint activities on blogs and Facebook pages and so on. That's an interesting technological approach as well. Same goes for the Plataforma en Defensa de Libertad de Información. I think Joan Barata is talking tomorrow, so he will say maybe more about this tomorrow, because he's representing this organization, which is also a broad platform of professionals and lawyers, consumers, and civil society organizations to defend independence in media. And then in Italy, the section of the Trade Union of Journalists in RAI, USIG-RAI, has also campaigning here. I would like to go more into the content rather than the strategy of the USIG-RAI. What they defend, I think, is interesting for all the public media across Europe. Is their proposal are basically three proposals which were contained a couple of years ago in the draft law, which was never adopted, unfortunately. Is first of all, the public RAI, basically the public media should not be owned legally by the ministry, but should be owned by an independent foundation, which would delink, so to say, the ownership from the government. Secondly, they want to introduce a dual system of governments, based a little bit on the German example, that not only a broadcasting council with representatives of the politicians and the government, but also representatives of civil society groups and the components of the society. And then an interesting proposal is to have a differentiated system of nomination to this management of the public broadcasting, in a way that once the government or the parliament, well, basically the authorities change in a country, you cannot have this winner takes all approach, which takes place in many countries, that politicians think that public media is a little bit like their tool or their toy. If you cannot nominate all of the governing body at the same time, it would prevent political interference in public media. Anyway, the conclusion on that is that all these campaigns defend strong public service media, even in Western democracies where you would think that public service media are guaranteed. And that's maybe very inspiring for other countries, like we just mentioned before, Hungary, Slovenia, Poland, and to a certain extent, Croatia. Other positive developments are what unions and individual do for individual cases, individual problems against journalists. Well, obviously, most of the unions, I didn't mention it here, but the NUJ does it as well in the UK, but it's the case in Estonia, Hungary, Spain, Turkey, and even Belarus, is unions are here to support individual journalists either legally, but also by expressing solidarity and support. That's the case, especially in Turkey and Belarus, when journalists are put on trial or in jail. For example, right now, recently, the BAJ, the Association of Journalists in Belarus, has been starting a campaign to write letters to journalists who are in jail. That happened also in Turkey a couple of years ago, when members of foreign journalists were asked to invited to support individual journalists in jail in Turkey. Now, obviously, these are extreme examples, but most of the responses to the survey say that apart from political pressure, big principles, the individual solidarity and support is extremely important. One union, I think it's Hungary, said, what we want in this project, and also in general, is we do not want to feel alone. It's very important to know what others are doing and that we are supported.
Marc?
And then finally, I know I have to cut. Good examples are also new media created in Hungary. I have here Telex and Direct 36, which were created last year by so-called dissident journalists who were fired from former media. Journo, this is in Turkey, supported by the TGS. Maybe somebody from TGS can say more. And Novi Swat and Radio 357. This is in Poland. Basically, when journalists were fired or put under pressure, they managed to create new media, and that's very positive.
Maybe we can talk about good practices and your recommendation on the second part.
Sure. Okay.
We have this very interesting research from Vaclav,
okay.
and we will talk about it after Vaclav. As you probably saw in our chat about your speech, Julie said that Turkey is the biggest jail in journalists, journalists, unfortunately, not only in Europe, but in the world. And Mustafa sent us new information about 43 journalists jailed in Turkey. But you all can hear more about situation in Turkey tomorrow on our webinar when Mustafa will talk about situation.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and now I call Vaclav. And we will hear his very interesting research. Vaclav, are you here with us? What your research has shown that, as I heard it about public television and the situation in media. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello again. And it's pleasure to not just be here, but also to follow after Marc's highly intriguing presentation about the current threats to media freedom and independence across Europe. And in my own presentation, I will take a little bit more restricted geographical approach and focus on Central and Eastern Europe, which as a region I have been devoting my scholarly and research attention for a while, and now especially as part of this research project that I have mentioned, the illiberal turn, which examines the relationship between news media consumption and audience attitudes, or people's attitudes in the region. May I share my screen, Marc? I think you have to stop sharing yours.
Marc, can you stop sharing your screen? Okay. Maybe Yuklan can help us. Maybe Yuklan is here. No. Let me see if I have. No, I cannot.
Yeah, I will try to stop.
Okay.
I cannot stop it. I don't know why. Do you still see mine?
Yes, we just see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The last part.
How can I do that? I don't see it. I'm sorry about that.
Yuklan.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm trying to stop the screen.
Okay, here it is.
Now,
thank you.
Now you managed. Okay.
Yeah.
And now,
Okay.
Vaclav, you can try.
I can try.
Sorry.
Certainly. Hopefully, I'll be successful. Okay, are you seeing my screen now?
Yes, Vaclav, floor is yours and the screen.
Excellent. So I'm going to skip the first part largely because that was going to be supposed to be sort of a general introduction into the intensifying trends of democratic backsliding in Central and Eastern Europe, which first of all of you in this virtual room are well aware of, and second of all, they have been mostly mentioned several times during the introductory presentations by the MEPs as well as by by Marc. So you know what's going on in these countries. Perhaps one country that has been missing so far in the speeches, as well as in Marc's research, has been Czech Republic, my native country. So some of you probably know that although it has not been as frequently in the media with regards to journalistic autonomy and independence as its counterparts in Hungary and Poland, it doesn't mean that there are no problems. Quite the contrary. Nearly all mainstream news media are basically under the ownership of the country's wealthiest businessmen or oligarchs, if you will, including the Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, who is the owner of one of the biggest media companies, Mafra. And at the same time, there have been increasing attacks on the independence of public service broadcasters, especially the Czech television, following a series of politically motivated, politically partisan appointments to the regulator, the Czech Television Council, last year. And only a few weeks ago, there has been a statement issued in support of Czech television by several international organizations who have voiced their concerns about these attacks, especially on the Director General of the broadcaster. So this is just a graph by the Freedom House, which I'm sure many of you are also familiar with. It simply illustrates the scope and depth of the democratic decline in the region, with Hungary and Poland obviously leading the trend. Poland was, by the way, downgraded in this issue of in this report of nations in transit to a semi-consolidated democracy last year, and Hungary now appears alongside those countries that are classified as transitional or hybrid regimes. So again, another slump and another slide down towards illiberalism. Of course, it is not to claim that these trends are not observed elsewhere in Europe. However, there is a clear regional pattern, as evidenced, for example, by the latest edition of the Media Pluralism Monitor, that maps, as you know, the risks to media pluralism across both political and across the EU and beyond. And the comparative data show, as you can see on this on these two maps, that risks to media independence from both political and commercial actors, that's the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the screen, are significantly higher in Central and Eastern Europe than in other parts of Europe. Well, I'm sure that colleagues from the Center for Media Pluralism and Freedom, Elda Broggi and Roberta Carlini, will be giving further insights into this instrument and its results later in the program today. However, as I announced, I'm going to talk today about the issues of media independence and related issues from an audience perspective, which is quite often missing in these kind of debates about media independence and the ways how to protect it. And I'm going to be using the data from the project that I mentioned already. This is just some basic information about the project for your better understanding of how it is organized and what kind of methodologies we have been using. Right now, we are entering the final phase of the project, which means we have collected all the data, and we're busy with analyzing and also writing reports and recommendations. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to share some selected preliminary findings with you, and particularly with regards to the issues of media independence, media trust, and attitudes towards certain polarizing issues. And I will be also devoting special attention to the role of public service media in line with this general thrust of this webinar. So the first finding I would like to share concerns people's opinions on the importance of media independence. So we ask people to indicate how important it is for them that the press is independent from the government. And as you can see, across all the 4 countries in our sample, political independence of media is highly valued by the respondents. Between 56 and 70% of the respondents have selected the highest grade, meaning that it's totally important for them. And interestingly, media independence seems to be relatively more important in countries with lower media freedom. So perhaps illustrating, as it is often the case, we only start to value something that we are about to lose. When asked to evaluate the actual independence of media in their countries, people's responses reveal that there is a strong discrepancy between what is perceived as a normative ideal and reality on the ground, because most media are not seen as independent by the people, which is perhaps not surprising. And here I have to explain that we did not just ask about media independence in general. One of the special features of our project is that we distinguished the general media independence and the media independence and other characteristics which we measured on the level of individual media brands. So this is where we differ from many other studies on these issues. We have selected 16 most important news media brands in each country across different media types, and we asked the respondents to evaluate their performance on various variables. And the results show that, of course, as I mentioned, the level of independence for most media brands is low, but there are some differences among the countries. Namely, in Serbia and Hungary, most brands are seen as significantly dependent on either government or owners, while in Czech Republic and Poland, there is a sort of a tendency for many brands to gravitate at least towards the center. But we have also used an expert survey to help us classify these individual news brands in a more objective manner, but also to juxtapose the experts' evaluation against the perceptions of the public. And as expected, this is just the results from Czech Republic. The people and experts differ in their evaluation of the level of independence of most brands, and that presumably reflects the polarized character of the public. But the ranking of the media brands, according to which they assess their independence, is actually correlated. In other words, people agree, on average, which media brands are relatively more independent than others. So that means that even though people are generally more critical about the media in general, on average, they are not living in completely different realities from how media brands are assessed by experts in the field. However, I do stress that these are average figures. So these are just for illustration, the maps, the graphs from other countries, which I will not going to comment on. Moving on to media trust. And first of all, it is clear that as an institution, media are rather distrusted by the majority of the population in all 4 countries. And again, with some differences among these countries, very well corresponding to the level of media freedom. So the country with the highest level of distrust to media is Serbia, followed by Hungary, and on the other hand, Czech Republic, even though the level of media trust is still low, it is the highest of all 4 countries. But again, we have to move on the level of individual media brands in order to get a more fine-grained, more heterogeneous picture. And that picture reveals some important differences among those brands. And most of all, there is a striking correlation between the perception of independence and trust. In other words, those media that are, on average, seen as more independent are also more trusted by the average population. In Czech Republic, public service media are trusted by far. In Serbia and Poland and Hungary, it is the other way around. It is the private and oppositional media that are trusted more. And by the way, these findings are backed by data from Reuters Institute's Digital News Report project, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And that project also has been continuously showing high trust to brands that are perceived as independent in these countries and low trust to government-controlled media. Interestingly, the differences in perceived independence and trust in public service broadcasters, and this is something I'm going to focus on right now, So the trust in public service broadcasters in the Czech Republic on the one hand side and the other three countries. So these differences are mirrored in the attitudes of their respective audiences towards certain particular issues that are known to be polarizing the public in these countries, and that are also known to be often used by populist and illiberal political actors to mobilize voters. So I suppose it is no surprise to you that one of the most contentious and polarizing issues is immigration, which has been successfully exploited by various populist actors in the region. And we have seen from the results that quite clearly consumption or consumers of the public service television and radio in Czech Republic have actually quite higher positive attitudes towards immigrants. On the contrary, the consumers of state media, of public service or state media in Poland and Hungary are actually on average much more negatively prejudiced towards immigrants. Just to help you understand this graph, basically what it means that when the horizontal line crosses the vertical red one, it means the relationship is not statistically significant. So we are only looking at those results where the horizontal line does not cross the vertical line in order to be able to tell something with certainty that there is a relationship between the variables. And this is again mirrored and copied basically with regards to other illiberal attitudes. We measured, for example, the attitudes towards Muslims, and we see the mirror image of the previous findings on immigration. Again, higher consumption of public service media in Czech Republic is linked with less negative attitudes towards Muslims in the Czech Republic, but with more anti-Muslim attitudes in Poland, Hungary, and Serbia. LGBT issues, another notoriously contentious issue in the region, clearly a statistically significant relationship between consumption of state media in those two countries, Poland and Hungary, and on the other hand, less significant or more positive relationship in the Czech Republic. Couple more examples, which I'm not going to go into in the sake of time, but basically illustrating the same tendencies. Basically illustrating that public service media or state media, to be more precise, in Hungary, Poland, and sometimes in Serbia, are basically can be considered as vehicles for illiberalism in these countries, while in the Czech Republic, the public service broadcasters are on the side that still opposes these trends. There's one more graph, if I have time to show it. It's about something slightly different, but I think very relevant and important for the debate. It concerns the extent of polarization in these four countries, as measured by the expert survey, expert assessment of the political and ideological positions of these 16 individual media outlets. I'm sorry you cannot see all the brands because they overlap, but that's not really important here. What is important is the difference between the two countries on the left, Czech Republic and Poland, and those one on the right, Hungary and Serbia, because in those ones on the right, you can clearly see that the hollow, empty center in the middle, which means that basically there are no brands, no media brands that would represent politically and ideologically neutral position. In other words, the extent of media polarization is far greater in those two countries than in the Czech Republic and Poland. And in the Czech Republic, again, it's mostly due to the strong presence of public service broadcasters, both television and radio, that sort of occupy this center. And this has obviously certain implications for the future of the media systems in these countries, because as we know, as polarization grows, more and more media brands are sort of pushed towards adopting ever more extreme, radical attitudes towards certain issues. further polarizing the audiences and the prospect for meaningful debate across the political spectrum is diminishing. So what are some of our summaries from the findings? That some of them I have presented, others I haven't had a chance to present, obviously, because it's a huge project. But in general, we have found an existence of a link between consumption of news media that are under heavy political influence, whether through the state or some government-friendly oligarchs, and the illiberal attitudes of their audiences on various polarizing issues. Under such conditions, our next finding is that the more liberal-minded part of the population are often turning to digital and social media. We've already heard it in the introductory speeches today with regards to Hungary, but also Serbia. So those are the countries with lower scores of media freedom. And in these countries, obviously, it doesn't mean that the digital social media are completely exempt from channeling illiberal attitudes, but still overall their audiences tend to be less illiberal in their opinions than those that are consuming primarily state and traditional media. So in other further expand on this finding, digital platforms, including messenger apps, might serve as a sort of a counterbalance to the government-controlled part of the news media ecosystem, sort of a pockets of resistance, if you wish, and the last safe haven for independent journalism. Finally, what are the lessons to be taken from some of these findings? Well, clearly, in those countries, in most of these countries, the biggest risk to democracy currently stems not from digital media platforms, but from government and government-controlled media. And that has certain implications for the issues of regulation, for the discussion about regulation, because as you know, especially in Western countries, the debate about the regulation of digital media is currently heavily tilted towards those who want to push strongly against the digital platforms and bring them to responsibility for the content, which is obviously understandable. However, in the context of our region of Central and Eastern Europe, there is a certain warning. There's a risk that the fight against fake news and disinformation could play into the hands of the illiberal governments and weaken their ability to serve as independent communication channels. That's one of the lessons to be learned. And obviously, again, repeating the point that was made already by Marc and others, we need politically independent public service broadcasters as the only pretty much institution at the moment that is able to meaningfully bridge divides and promote democratic values. And we have seen this particularly in the context of the pandemic, which has significantly increased the audiences for public service broadcasters, especially in the Czech Republic, but in other countries in Europe as well. So this is just some snapshots from our research. I'll be happy to add more in the discussion or individually if you are interested. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vaclav. It is very important research that shows us the importance of public service. I believe there will be questions. I see that Manuela raised a hand, but please, first, I have to give a floor to my colleague Zovko, who will speak on subject of SLAPP lawsuits. Zovko?
Thank you, Maja. Hello, everybody. My name is Zovko. Hello, I'm from Zagreb. The situation is dramatic. The situation is Croatia disagrees to European Union. This is disaster for journalism. Last Friday, Croatian Journalist Association present a new report on the number of lawsuits against journalism and media in Croatia. We currently have at least 924 lawsuits against journalism and media. The real number can only be bigger because 23 media outlets participated in the survey. SLAPP is a big problem in Croatia. The prosecutor, like many politicians, want to destroy journalism, journalists and media. At the moment, the plaintiffs are demanding 10.5 million euro from media. Is disaster. And I can repeat, the situation is dramatic, and we will continue fight against lawsuit and censorship. And thank you for support European Federation Journalism, support Croatian journalists. I have many words, but this is very important. They won't destroy journalism in media. I can repeat, SLAPP is big problem in Croatia, and situations in Croatia is disagree to European Union.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Zovko. If someone will have some questions, they can ask. We know that in all Europe, the SLAPP is very big problem. One of my questions can be for Vaclav or Marc. What is your opinion? What should state institution, European institution, what we all can do to stop this type of pressure on journalists? Marc, I saw that in your document you spoke about it and you have some recommendation. Maybe first I will give you a few minutes.
Yes. Well, thank you. Actually, yeah, I mean, it's good that you asked me because it was part of the things I wanted to say to close my presentation. One of the recommendations, actually, there is a draft directive, EU directive against SLAPP on the table, so to say, which has been put forward by different organizations. So one thing is, for example, that the EU, the European Commission, or EU institutions should take the issue seriously and legally, not just on principle, but also legally, because there are legal possibilities and instruments to counter the SLAPPs. More generally speaking, I think what came out of the people I talked to and so on is that Europe in general should take the issues of political interference and pressures, including SLAPPs, more seriously. And in other words, have a plan instead of having short-term projects, as the EU has, for example, sometimes in Turkey, or condemnations about Hungary. As Anna Donat said in the introduction, there is the question of the rule of law. I mean, Poland and Hungary have been criticized, and there have been legal and political declarations in that extent against Hungary and Poland. So now it's time to act. The problem with rule of law, I mean, the fact with rule of law is that you have to defend it by law, and it's up to the EU to have the legal instruments, starting with SLAPPs, for example.
Okay, thank you. I think that Manuela raised a hand, that I think that she has a comment on very good Vaclav, excellent presentations, and maybe if you have some comment on Vaclav or Marc's presentation, or some practice and experience from you now. Manuela, you can speak.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Manuela, je suis de France, from France. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everybody, for the testimonies and the studies. I was just wondering if Marc, Gruber, and Vaclav Stetka studies will be online, and can we see it again, study it, and report it in our organizations?
Marc, can you answer?
Oh, I think it's up to the organizers to reply to this question, but yes, the answer is yes. It's just, it's not circulated formally yet, because it's, from my point of view, I have to wait the input of today and tomorrow's discussion to finalize it. But roughly speaking, the answer is yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yes.
I
and we
can
see-
just add that we send it to the panelists, and it's very, very important to send it to you and get your feedback, because it's still a draft. There's still some questions. The more best practice we have, the better to circulate it around. And maybe, Maja, we could also get some comment from two of our EBU colleagues who are here. I think since this has been such an important issue, the question of public service media. My question to Vaclav is, he said that in Poland, for example, there's less polarization because there is still public service media. But we hear PSM in Poland is completely in the hands of the government, or almost. So I would like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you, Renate. This might have been a bit of a misunderstanding on my part, or I was not being entirely clear, and I conflated the explanation for the existence of the center in Poland and in Czech Republic. So in the Czech Republic, it's clearly occupied mostly by the public service broadcasters. But in Poland, the public service broadcasters have become nationalized, essentially, and instruments of government propaganda, and they are viewed even by the audience as not neutral anymore. So if I'm speaking about the existence of the center in Poland, it refers to either the tabloid, not really politically affiliated news outlets, or the commercial broadcasters who are closer to the center ideologically and politically as well. So thanks, it was important to distinguish. Yeah.
We have a question from Lucy for Vaclav. Will be Liberal Turn project continue also in the next years, or will be any follow-up? Would be interesting to see how the audience perceive new, smaller independent media in all these countries which have been set up in the last years. So to involve also this media in the research. Vaclav, can you answer, please?
Yes, thank you. This is obviously pointing to one of the limitations of our project, because we have, as you have heard in my presentation, focused mostly on the sort of bigger mainstream news media outlets with the largest audience shares for the most part, and left aside some of those new, especially digital media outlets that have been created in the last several years, like Telex in Hungary, or there are other companies, other outlets like that in Czech Republic or Poland. So yes, this would be obviously interesting to focus on in a follow-up, and I do hope that there will be a follow-up. We are currently exploring options for further research, for further funding, and expanding beyond the scope of the 4 countries that we have had so far. So if we succeed in that, I think that we should really incorporate this focus on these new digital, more fringe perhaps, but alternative media outlets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Morgan, you raise your hand.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for two very good interventions from you, Vaclav, and you, Marc. It was very interesting to get that knowledge and that overview. What I would like to ask you about is the influence of government in public service media, because we see and from your surveys that that public service media are more some countries more state media than public service media. You mentioned Vaclav in Czechia about that well, they are perceived as a more trustful media. But now there have been a new election for the board of the council of the public service TV. Also, you, Marc, you mentioned that we should get away from the winner takes it all approach to public service media. What would your suggestion be for us to take sort of actions to take here? Will we see this move towards more state media more rapidly in the near future? And what's your take on how we should deal with this? Should we do as Christoph Bobinski, for instance, says here, that we should urge EPU to take more actions?
Well, if I just may quickly, first of all, I have been using in the research and the slides the label public service media, even for those broadcasters that are no longer fulfilling the public service mission. It's simply for the sake of simplicity, but I do hope that you understand that when I'm talking about the public service media in Hungary and Poland especially, what I'm really talking about is government-controlled media outlets. So this is just to clarify the terminology. But if there are any lessons to be learned, I think that from our project at least, it comes quite clearly that public service media fulfill certain specific function in the society and can act as both sort of counterbalance towards polarization in general and these illiberal trends in particular. Because when these broadcasters are being taken over or controlled by the government and become their mouthpiece, they take their audience with them towards basically to merge with the voters of these governing illiberal parties, and they further stimulate the process of spreading the illiberal values in the society, as we have seen from the results of our survey. So it's of course extremely difficult to reverse this trend. I'm afraid that what happened in Poland and in Hungary, and I don't want to bring the hopes down all the way, but I'm very skeptical about the possibility of this trend being reversed in Poland and Hungary, unless obviously there is a political change. Without a domestic political change, and nothing will happen. But what we are trying to say with the results that come from at least Czech Republic is that in the countries that are still on the verge, that are still where the public service broadcasting is still relatively independent, there's a big danger, big risk of this situation not lasting, and the governing illiberal actors doing basically the same trick as they did in Hungary and Poland. So the more effort has to be placed in defending independence of these countries, and that's why it's so important that organizations such as the EFJ and others have raised their voice in support of independence of public service broadcasters in Czech Republic, because otherwise, I'm afraid, if there was not for this external pressure, some perhaps things would have already happened in the direction that those illiberal politicians and actors want them to happen.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that Nicole Frank is with us from European Broadcast Union. Please, can you maybe comment on this, about this very important research Vaclav made that shows how important public service and independence of public service is, and what we can do or what you can do to defend it across the Europe?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. And it's really extremely important what the findings of this research. Unfortunately, it's not a big surprise, must be said, but it gives more background to the developments. And what Vaclav said is that it's of course very much a mirror of, let's say, general political developments in countries. So as EBU, what we have always tried to do is influence the process, when it was still in the making with Poland, with Hungary. Now the same thing with the Czech Republic. We have been very outspoken recently about the developments, and very negative developments around the council elections and the politicization of the procedure. So that we try to do, and it's very good to see that there is a lot of support of many other organizations, and that there is still this conviction that independent public service media is so important for the general media landscape. We have to work together on these issues, that's very clear, and I would very much like to bring the results of this study also to our organization and to our membership, and or both of the studies actually, and to show them what you found out. I think that would be really good, and I will propose that. Yeah, let's see what we can do together. Thank you very much in any case for this very good insight and very good research and arguments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are 5 minutes till 1 o'clock. We are on the end of this part of our webinar. So maybe a few words, conclusions from our guests, Marc and Vaclav, and then we will have to finish. Marc?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, sorry for having been a bit too long. I didn't realize I've been talking too much. Maybe I think the interesting thing here is what we just discussed with Morgans and Nicola Frank, is that what can we do to defend, for example, public service media in the broad sense, whether state media, public service, whatever you call it. You have the legal environment, I think, which is extremely important. And here the EU has a big role to play in order to defend the rule of law, as they say or pretend to say a couple of years now already. Second is the structures, the governance of the media, which is very important for public service media as such, as an institution, but also for new initiatives. And there are many new initiatives across Europe of new media structures, for example, working with crowdfunding, with foundations, with different ways to finance media, because at the end, it's always follow the money. If you have the money, you have the power, and that works also for the media. And thirdly, it's a maybe more professional aspect here is to make sure that the self-regulation systems that I gave a couple of examples is efficient and not just something on paper saying we have a great media council, but it's not working. I think these, in my view, are the three directions to reinforce, to confront political interference in media.
Thank you. Vaclav?
Yeah, I can only second what Marc has just said, especially the part where he mentioned the economic sustainability, financial sustainability of the media. And again, I'm speaking about Central and Eastern Europe in particular, where, as you know, media have been financially especially weakened recently and taken over by the oligarchs and friends of the government. So clearly more investment needs to be made into the strengthening of the sector of independent media. And in that respect, I think there are some encouraging signs that come also from the time of the pandemic, which might be a paradox, but actually it's some positive lesson that we have seen over the last several months and over the last year. We have seen a rise in subscriptions to quality independent news media outlets, including those in Czech Republic, in Hungary, in Poland. So people are clearly appreciating quality, trustworthy, reliable sources of information, especially in the times of crisis like the pandemic, like we have lived in. So there is an appetite for, I think that it's clear there is an appetite for trustworthy independent media sources. But then there should be some external help, external source to help these sources thrive and survive, at least until they have built the level of independence, until they have built sufficient readership or audience base. But from this perspective, I'm being cautiously optimistic.
Thank you very much. Now we are on the end of our session. We have a few more questions. All questions is for Nicole. I don't know, Nicole, if you see these questions in our chat. It's about situation in Poland and about situation in Hungary. If you want, you can answer on these questions.
Okay, yeah, I see it. And yes, as I said, I mean, we we tried to intervene when the systems as we have them now were established through changing media law, media and often supervisory committees being established or misused in certain side. But now you have a political situation, and it's a broader political issue, which reflects the system in the different countries. We have also at times spoken to the political level, but as you know, I mean, EU doesn't manage to change the political systems, so we're in a way quite limited in what we do. I mean, we want to keep these broadcasters as members because we're convinced that it's better to remain in a dialogue and not to completely, outcast certain broadcasters. And we have a lot of cooperation on many different fields where professionals cooperate very well together still. And so this we want to maintain. And that's all I can say at this moment. I mean, as you saw for the Czech Republic case, we did intervene and were outspoken. We published articles in the press releases. We wrote to the government, and we did what we thought was useful to do at this moment. The same we did at the time in Poland and Hungary. And I think if other countries will get into this position, we'll do it again.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I see, and I think that we all see that we need one new big debate about public services, because there is so many people who want to say something. I see another two hands, yellow hands. So maybe I know it's 1 o'clock.
I think we have two more moments. So those two, and then I will give just 2 final words. So that's
okay.
fine. Thank you, Maja.
Super. First, Anna.
Well, I'm not Anna. I'm David Donner's office. Thank you very much. I actually raised this question in writing, but Nicola didn't quite exactly answer. So it was the position of EPP in the European Parliament for a very long time, and especially the German CDU and CSU, to keep the dialogue with the Fidesz, because it's better to have them inside EPP than kick them out. And it didn't end up well. So I'm still insisting a little bit on this issue that, I mean, Hungary's public service media is clearly violating the statute, the very core of EBU's values. Don't you think that at some point you have to show some kind of statement, and you have to show some kind of courage that you need to step up against those illiberal tendencies? Because it's not, I mean, okay, I understand that you also have as members, I think, from Belarus as well, but you know, this at some point levels down the really the values of EBU if you don't try to act upon them. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We understand that. I think that Nicola also understands your question, and please try to be short, Tarek.
Yes. Hi, I'm Tarek. I'm a journalist from France. Thank you very much for these interesting presentations. I was wondering, since you said that public media outlets in Poland and Hungary are controlled by governments, I was wondering how journalists are behaving to resist these pressures. Are they leaving their own media or staying and working and thus misinforming the public and serving maybe the propaganda of their own regimes? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We all know that it's not good situation, and we see in this our debate. But I think that the research of our guests shown that it pays off to fight for strong and independent media, because we saw in Vaclav research that it's bring a kind of stability or better situation in society. I believe that this debate shown that it's useful to fight for free media and from free public media and strong public media. Renata, probably you probably want to say something about, and we also that a problem with public service is very important and very big.
Yes, I just don't want to get into the issue now. Just in addition, we have been working very closely with the EBU on many issues, specifically also on common alerts to the Council of Europe platform for the protection and safety of journalists. We do understand that for the EBU it is not so easy, but I think it still makes sense to put pressure also on the EBU, and I'm very happy Nicola is here with that, to have this dialogue we always had and we need to continue to have. I just wanted to add that we have also, actually it's now the IFJ leading, but the EFJ had been involved in a specific project on reform of public service media in the Balkan. As you know, it's easier very often for the European Commission to do reform in media when they are still applicant countries. And this is a very important, but it's not an easy approach you can imagine. And also deals with financing, it deals with cultures that need to change, that take a lot of time. And as Vaclav said, it's all fragile. It's even fragile in our member states. We have to watch day by day what's happening. We've seen that throughout Europe. We have also seen attacks against journalists from PSN throughout Europe. I read in this Council of Europe report that there are, I think, about 35 security alerts by day by Swedish broadcasters on journalists. Even in Denmark, journalists who in a transparent way give out their emails, they're getting smear campaigns. In the Netherlands, they don't even show their trusted emblem anymore because they're afraid of getting attacks. So we have attacks against public service media, both from political sides, but unfortunately also from all these conspirationists and, as we say in German, Querdenker, lateral thinkers, and that is an issue. And I think there we also can work together because there we have a common enemy, but it is complicated. But I just want to, because we have to finish, I want to say again, thank you to you, Maja, for a very good moderation. Thank you to Marc and thank you to Vaclav. I think both of you with excellent contributions. Sometimes I think, well, again, another study, we know it all, but I think this one has shown that it is so important to keep monitoring what is happening from different perspectives. We need academia and we need the cooperation between academia and our trade unions and associations who fight so hard at national level, but do not always have the resources to do such resources and to use it for their own tools. So yes, I can only thank you. And I also would like to say thank you to the MEPs and, for example, Anna Donut's assistant who stays with us and whom I know quite well, and it's very important to keep our cooperation ongoing. We need you, and we also hope that you need us a little bit. So I would like to finish now and tell you, please be there tomorrow. Tomorrow we have our session starting from 1 o'clock till 16:30. It will be a bit longer. We will also shed a very important eye on the situation in Belarus. As you know, the really fire is burning there, and in Turkey. And we will have the OSCE following that. We will show a few more examples from our unions. And at the very end, we will have an important session on EU instruments, also the Center for Media and Pluralism, Freedom in Florence. It was already quoted several times. And our President Moyens will moderate this final session. So thank you very much. You all deserve a great lunch and see you hopefully tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Merci.
Bye-bye. Thank you. See you tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.